After a person committed a large-scale attack who didn't fit the background of the stereotypical suspect, the media and the internet went into a frenzy. While many condemned the attack, many others came to show sympathy for the criminal after feeling that they were on the same side of politics. This is the story of the extremely controversial Nashville attack. Today's story is a complicated one, and it involves a lot of sensitive topics related to gender that are really hard to cover without making everybody angry, and I do acknowledge that I'm still probably going to make people angry no matter how I cover it. Long story short, the subject of today's video was pretty unsure about their own gender identity, and many people throughout the story continue to refer to them by different names back and forth. By the end, they even come to flip-flop on which name they're using themselves. So without getting too deep into it, I'm just going to refer to them as they throughout this video and use their last name just to make things more easily digestible in a narrative form. With that out of the way, let's get started at the beginning. The subject of today's video was born as Audrey Elizabeth Hale on March 24th, 1995. With their two parents and an older brother, they would come to live out their whole life in the Nashville area. Very early on, before even starting school, Hale began to experience struggles with mental health problems. According to their own writings, this began all the way back in the toddler stage. They were very sensitive to loud noises and were scared by large groups of other kids or adults or even animals. Hale's mother took note of this and decided to get them evaluated in 2001 when they were about 6 years old. It was found that Hale did have some developmental delays, had trouble asserting themselves in social situations, had fairly bad anxiety, and problems processing emotions. While Hale's mother worried that they likely had autism, nothing was found to suggest that that was the case. Still though, their mother held them back from kindergarten for a year to give them a little more time to mature. Eventually, Hale did progress through school, coming to attend the Covenant School throughout most of their elementary years. Hale would later describe these years as the happiest period of their life. They said that they felt both safe and accepted at Covenant, making friends fairly easily. Their home life was pretty happy as well, having no issues with their parents to speak of. They grew skilled in art, with even their teacher remarking at how talented they were at such a young age. All in all, Hale had a great time for those few years, but it would all have to come to an end eventually. Hale came to attend the Isaiah T. Cresswell Middle Magnet School for the Arts next, or just Cresswell for short. It was a bit of a culture shock, given that Covenant had mainly consisted of students coming from white, middle-class backgrounds, while Cresswell mainly had students from minority groups with parents who were more working class. Shortly after starting school, Hale began to get bullied for being white, often being called a rich white girl and humiliated by the other students. They went from having a lot of friends to suddenly being a complete social outcast. Things did take a turn for the better when Hale started playing for the basketball team. Despite being the only white player on the team and about a year behind all of the others, their teammates accepted them very easily and welcomed them with open arms. Hale felt that they had truly found some real friends within this group, even best friends. To their confusion, they also began to feel romantic feelings toward several of them. Hale grew completely obsessed with these teammates, coming to think about them daily for the rest of their entire life. In the summer between 7th and 8th grade, Hale came to the realization that most of their teammates would be graduating and going their separate ways, leaving Hale behind. Toward the end of the summer, they decided to write an entire 40-page story about the basketball team and their feelings around it. This became a story called After the Comets, with the Lady Comets being the name of the basketball team. While Hale was obsessed with all of the girls, they took a particular interest in a few of them. One of them was a girl named Sydney, and the other was named Paige. However, Hale had confusing feelings toward mostly all of them. Hale admitted to getting, quote, addicted to the depression and stress at the time, saying, "I've been trapped in probably one of the most longest lonely summers of my entire freaking life." This would begin a lifelong obsession with the girls from the team. Hale wrote, "I was in a terrible mind state of constant negativity and racing thoughts, drowned in doubts with losing the team and losing a lot of people, my teammates along with friends too. Barely got rest. Mind racing like the Indy 500 while turning to my left bedside, where my team picture was hanging perfectly on my wall. Just looking at it for a long period of time. Staring into the eyes of my long-lost teammates. I would cry and cry for days just a few weeks after their last day at IT, because I knew they were long gone. I thought I'd never see them again. I would cry as my pillow was damp every time I woke up to a new day. Hale then detailed that they were having difficulty remembering anything that happened that summer as a whole due to the obsessive thoughts of the basketball girls. They spent entire days staring at their yearbook photos, losing track of how many times they had stared at them when the count got into the thousands. Hale then continued to write about the team's failed aspirations, never getting to win the city championship. Hale remembered as one of their teammates, the girl named Sydney, cried on the sidelines as the final buzzer rang out. They wished that they could have seen Sydney's face if they had won instead. Of all of the girls, Sydney took up a good portion of Hale's mind that summer. However, Hale took solace in believing that this was God's plan and that there was meaning to the loss. The remainder of this story was spent making excuses for their losses and gushing about how incredible each girl on the team was. Many pages were also spent ranting about the gym coach at the school. While Hale details a bit of bullying in this story, mainly being yelled at by teachers or being made fun of for being white, they do actually admit that a lot of their social problems were their own, while still blaming the autism that their doctor said that they didn't have. Hale wrote, "I had social problems myself to start off, continue on a relationship because it was my stumbleness. I suffered keeping up with people. They turn fine but then go down a slope and I don't know what the hell to do because I hated talking on the phone, chatting in lunchtime, or do stuff outside of school. Honestly, I don't even like myself with the way I want things to go, but they end up now how I want to because of my wall of autism." However, at the end of the book, Hale acknowledged that something was coming. They wrote, "Sigh, no turning back. Gotta do this now or it will be too late. I'm real sorry. I'm so sorry." Hale never clarified what this was in reference to. Were they alluding to ending their own life, or something much worse? Hale continued in the same book by writing a new story, for lack of a better term. This one was called As I Walk Through the Doors of High School. They talked about normal fears of entering into a new school without knowing anybody else. They wondered if they would have sisters again, referring to the old basketball team. They stressed about what clothes to wear. Mainly, they were concerns common to most kids entering into high school. When one of the girls from basketball started going to their new school, Hale was overjoyed. They thought it was due to God answering a prayer. Here, it was clear that Hale wasn't as close with those girls as they wanted it to seem. This was because Hale admitted that they didn't even know where the other girls were going to school, instead simply waiting around this new school and hoping that they happened to attend the same one. They actually ran around the school trying to find them, mainly Sydney. Hale did meet up with one more girl, but it wasn't her. Hale continued to write in this book like a diary from that point onward, dropping the story format. Hale continued to express that they felt that being white was holding them back from making friends, feeling that the other students, quote, don't give a flip-wad damn about them. One thing that Hale took particular insecurity in was the fact that the basketball girls were likely off with boys. This was something that they mentioned multiple times and discussed. This disappointment slowly turned to hatred, with Hale saying, "They got all the homies in the world but me, just me and only me. I wasn't special to 'em anyway. I never thought I was special to them from the very damn start. Took advantage of me, didn't pick me up when I've been down, thrown into a ditch of deadgery, concealed in my own obsessive past all weak and shy and shit. Just liked me for being a white kid." Later, Hale continued, "Why do they care? They don't care about the damn lady comets. They damn don't. They're too invested in the treacherous high school party living to even think about or bring up, most importantly remember." Again, Hale grew jealous of boys, adding, "You have a damn boyfriend" in the list of complaints. Hale admitted to wearing the other girls' jerseys to feel their presence, writing, "I wore your legendary jersey and you think there's no passionate meaning or reality that I freaking looked up to you and meant it. I'm going ballistically, uncontrollably insane." Hale continued to rant about feeling abandoned by these girls for several pages, who likely barely even thought of them anymore. Surprisingly, it came clear that Hale didn't really even associate with the basketball girls outside of practice, unless you count watching them go about their day. Hale wrote, "But the thing that excited me most of all every day within every morning was seeing my dear loved teammates that I tried my best to recognize them whenever I got a chance, even if it was only for a second. Seeing them here, seeing them there. In the cafeteria, in the hallways, see them even running errands every now and then. But why not? I see them in the bathroom." Hale didn't mention hanging out with them outside of practice even once, or really even talking to them in any meaningful capacity. In fact, they admitted to the contrary. Quote, I never really at all spent actual friend time with them because I didn't communicate. I didn't show. It was like love and interestedness in complete overmasked disguise. Nothing I did except on that team almost 3 damn years ago. 3 damn years. I didn't have their phone numbers. Hid myself from them when they were present because I was scared, and they were in classes I wasn't in since they were all sophomores. These rants about missing their teammates continued on for many, many, many more pages, showcasing a clear pattern of extreme obsession. Hale attempted to write some letters to these teammates, even planning the order of who they would give them to. Hale, according to the writing, did hand over one of these letters, saying, "I have everything and anything I could think of, every speck and detail of what she had to know, and I hope she'd understand how much I put value into it." Hale later confronted this girl in the parking lot, asking her what she thought of the letter. She responded awkwardly, "It was sweet. I thought you didn't care," clearly implying that they weren't that close. Hale took it to mean that they should have made an effort to connect more. Hale then continued by giving a letter to another one of the girls, confronting her in the hall while she was with friends and handing it over. Hale got a response later on. This girl said that being white didn't matter, told Hale that she would recommend them for the basketball team in high school, and left the door open to talk again at some point. All in all, a pretty simple letter. Regardless, even with only this, Hale was overjoyed. They mentioned to the girl later that it made them cry, to which the girl seemed very puzzled. Hale then grew angry and felt that this girl didn't really understand them at all. Now they were afraid to even give the letters out. The next letter went to Sydney. They exchanged some awkward greetings during the exchange. The next day, Sydney hadn't written back. This was when Hale made the mistake of saying, "Oh, you don't have to," something they would later come to regret immensely. Due to this, Hale came home and vomited. Hale then wrote a poem about how much they loved black people, notably using written Ebonics. It is a rough read. It says, "The only white girl that was loved and accepted from an all-black team. No white girl would have gone through an inspiring team experience than you. No white girl would have been more blessed and would not ask for anything else than that. You changed this white girl's basketball life forever. Treated me so sweetly regardless of being a white girl. You all will never understand how now it all means to me. This white girl loved this black team. This white girl loved black people like you. I didn't care that you were black. I infatuately loved you for the heart you had, not the color." Hale ended up writing something very racist against these black friends, however. In a journal, they wrote, "My sisters found me as a loner stray and let me in with them like Tarzan and the gorillas." Hale concluded the book with a collage of their own photos from their basketball days, along with one photo of the team and what appears to be cut-out excerpts about them from a yearbook. Throughout high school, Hale struggled to come to terms with the fact that their former teammates were moving on with their young lives. The girls had gotten new interests, made new friends, and moved on to different schools themselves. Their new circles were fairly different from Hale's. As much as Hale tried, they couldn't vibe with these new groups, leading to a feeling of isolation. Hale began to think about ending their own life for the first time around this point. Noticing that something was wrong, their mother took them to the hospital again to be evaluated. This led to Hale coming to see a therapist regularly. This therapist noticed that something was clearly wrong with Hale and sent them for a psychological evaluation. It was concluded that they suffered from major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, dysmic disorder, a specific form of depression that causes low self-esteem and loss of interest, social phobias, and anger management issues, and that they were underdeveloped emotionally with poor social skills. Again, it was concluded that Hale didn't have autism despite them continuing to self-diagnose with it. Regardless, they came to regularly attend therapy and take medication for the other problems. When Hale graduated from high school, they started to attend a college for art called Nashville College of Art and Design. They later wrote that they actually had no interest in moving on to college, given their past experiences with bullying at school, but that their mother made them, feeling that it was the only chance they had at ever living independently. On the first day of class, Hale had an outburst after being unable to create a password on the computer, leading to them storming out of the room. However, being interested in art, Hale was surprised to find that the classes were actually pretty enjoyable. At the same time, though, they lamented that their previous basketball teammates from middle school were only drifting further and further away. Aside from the occasional social media post, communication with them was becoming near non-existent by this point. Hale began to rant about the girls, saying that they were bad friends who had abandoned them. When one of Hale's previous basketball teammates, a woman named Paige, set up her new email at her university, Hale was able to figure out what it would be by looking at other student emails and sent her a message immediately, before Paige had even looked at the account. Around that time, Hale also sent her some memorabilia from their time as teammates. Paige wasn't sure of what to do, later saying, "I'm trying to be as respectful and also as honest as possible. It felt obsessive. It felt like stalkerish behavior." Little did she know, Hale's strange behavior towards her was only starting. Hale continued to stay in college for quite some time. This brings us up to 2017 when they were about 22 years old. Hale was becoming more stressed, more lonely, and more clearly mentally ill. Their body weight dropped to an alarmingly low level, something both their mom and their therapist made note of. Hale agreed to go to a clinic to be treated for anorexia for 6 weeks that summer. Gradually, they got back up to a healthy weight, but the depression that led to the lack of eating in the first place hadn't really changed much. It was the autumn after that summer that Hale's life and mental outlook would take a drastic turn for the worst. That November, they started to watch numerous documentaries about school shootings and other mass killings as they ruminated on their own issues with school, socializing, and bullying. They quickly became deeply fascinated with the idea of carrying out one's own revenge on such a grand scale. Hale couldn't get enough, seeking out more and more information about the topic. Hale collected any articles that they could find about these killers, downloading images of them, reading up on what weapons they used, learning about their motives, obsessing over how many people they killed, and finally reading about their own mental health problems. Putting together a massive image macro in Photoshop that compiled all of this information, Hale began to notice something. They kept returning to learning about the Columbine massacre no matter what. While they were fascinated with other killers, the Columbine shooters, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were the two that they felt they most connected with. This was mostly due to the killers' views on society and the mental health problems that they had, something that Hale felt mirrored their own outlook perfectly. Hale began to obsess over how much notoriety that they had gained after carrying out their attack, taking a particular interest in the fans that they still have to this day. Hale began to wonder if they, in their own words, could become a god like Eric and Dylan. Of their Columbine obsession, Hale later wrote, "Eric and Dylan, I respect those two guys. I admire them for what they have done. They are a part of who I am today. I finally found other two supreme beings such as me who underline my own values and belief set, relatable in thoughts, actions, and desires. I want to do all the things they did, hate people, stupid Christian bitches, purchase guns, and kill all the beings so different than them. I want to leave the earth with something everyone will remember. If I fell off a fucking bridge and killed myself, no one will remember that shit. But a mass shooting, I will leave with a validating cause/awareness and influence on future generations. Eric and Dylan have been more successful for the impact they have left since, and I wish they killed more kids, too concerned with those default bombs. They were intelligent at a higher power, knew their purpose to kill and in existence to humanity. Well, that's how I feel. I want to kill like them. Not be just like them, but be my own supreme existence to ultimate power over all weak, useless, dumb shits. I will kill eventually, and I will when the time is right, and that time is on countdown, just like theirs." In turn, Hale began to grow disgusted with mass killers who didn't achieve that same level of notoriety. They began to feel a particular sense of negativity towards killers with low kill counts, calling them amateurs and saying that they didn't deserve respect. They said that their pathetic attacks made it harder for people like them, Eric and Dylan, to carry out what they called godlike intentions. After obsessing over these types of crimes for the next 6 or 7 months, Hale began to fantasize about committing an attack of their very own in the summer of 2018. They began to write about how they were growing tired of being ignored and alone, saying that this was due to their own self-diagnosed autism. They began to rant about one of their previous basketball teammates for having a relationship with a man instead of them. This was the catalyst that made Hale decide that they needed to do something that would get them noticed, by any means necessary. They decided that if they were to kill a bunch of helpless children, it wouldn't be possible for others to ignore them any longer. While Hale was continuing with therapy and medication, their anger, sadness, and nervousness only continued to grow, and that would make itself very obvious over time. Around May of 2018, Hale started writing in a new book. This one was very disjointed. To start off, it began with artwork, hand-drawn comics, and poetry. However, cracks in this cutesy, happy exterior soon began to show. Hale began to write a sentence, that being, "All work and no play makes Audrey a dull girl," over and over and over again for an entire 2 pages. They began to document their further descent into depression with artwork demonstrating how they felt. Hale continued to self-isolate, only going to areas that they were interested in when they felt that there would be as few people as possible. Hale began to believe that their only true friends were their stuffed animals. They gave them their own names and personalities and began to take them everywhere. It was around this time that Hale also began to get into illegal activity for the first time, coming to shoplift from local businesses fairly often, calling it a shopping addiction. Usually, they would go for video games, toys, Pokemon cards, and art supplies. They justified all of the theft as being acceptable, reasoning that it soothed their anxiety and depression. For the first time, Hale came close to acting on their urge to end their life. This happened twice, and both of these times they stopped before actually injuring themselves beyond superficial marks. They said that this was due to the fact that they realized if they acted now, nobody would ever remember them or have a reason to care. This idea of being remembered only grew more and more prominent over time, becoming a major motivating factor in the future. Wanting to let loose on some anger, Hale began to write what they called rage storms. While the rage storms themselves have never been released, they have been heavily summarized by various outlets. These were long, rambling, expletive, and slur-filled rants towards people they knew or society in general. One of their favorite topics to write about was the idea that they had been ostracized for being autistic, once again despite never having been diagnosed after several evaluations. Another factor that really seemed to bother Hale was that, no matter how hard they tried, they just couldn't be accepted into black culture. Hale began to follow these same liberal politics that they felt would get black people to accept them, but it still didn't work. In turn, Hale took it a step further by hating white people in general, often going on large rants about white privilege despite being white themselves and coming from a wealthy background. It wasn't long before the majority of the anger in these rage storms got directed towards Hale's previous basketball teammates from middle school, who they were still obsessing over well into their 20s. They were furious at the fact that these girls were finding success in romance, their schooling, and their careers. Hale stalked them all on social media relentlessly, criticizing their posts and ranting about how they'd all abandoned them. By October 1st, 2018, Hale had started journaling again. Gone was the clean, legible handwriting that they had used in high school. Their handwriting was now noticeably more scratchy, more angry, and more lazy. Much like in the old days, they immediately began with a rant about fake friends, still most likely referring to the basketball team. Quote, "Ever since 8th grade, I have been ignored and pushed aside, except for accepting outgoers or outcasts like me. They say it's more than just basketball." Hale then, once again, even now 23 years old, continued to rant about their 7th grade basketball team for many, many more pages before quickly, abruptly dropping the topic and writing a list of Pokemon cards that they had seen on eBay. Returning to the topic, Hale pasted in photos of themselves with different girls from the basketball team, writing rants in the form of poems for them. Many of the poems are the same and highly repetitive. They rant about friendship, how good things were in the past, sisterhood, and the qualities that they loved about the girls. Eventually, Hale finally admitted that they had much more than a friend-level attraction to these girls. They admitted that they had been attracted to them sexually as well. Hale wrote, "You're not supposed to have intimate feelings with girls if you're a girl since I'm a Christian. That's what I tell myself, and a moral rule that I have to follow." It was then that Hale mentioned having an imaginary friend that was a boy in the past, a boy that was much more brave and open with his feelings, almost serving as the antithesis to everything that Hale was, saying, "This boy was born inside of me when I was only in the 4th grade. At first, I really didn't know who he was when I was young, but now that I am a young adult, I have tried to get to know him more by giving him the chance to speak. There were some small qualities my imaginary boy could do through me." After that revelation, Hale went right back to talking about loving black people and reminiscing about middle school. However, they said that black people didn't love them back, writing, "They didn't want to love me, rather judge me and laugh at some white girl piece of gay shit who appeared gay by wearing guy clothes." But shortly after admitting to only wearing guy clothes because the tightness of female clothes was uncomfortable. Oddly enough, all pictures of Hale in their younger years show them in feminine clothing, and Hale even mentioned being girly many times throughout the older journal, so it appeared Hale was gradually rewriting history to fit this new narrative. Then, as usual, the journal turned into a long-winded speech about how amazing the basketball girls in middle school were for many more pages. However, towards the end of this rant, Hale realized something. These girls must not have wanted to touch them because they were straight. They only love boys. Quote, "Will they think about saying goodbye or just treat me different, not to touch or hug me? Would my sexuality be treated like a disease to them? Would they understand and accept that I cannot help why I love who I love? that it's simply being that I was born this way. After all, my closest friends are straight. They love boys intimately. I don't. It was after this that Hale began to lean more on the imaginary male friend mentioned previously, talking to him, telling him secrets, and talking about girls. Hale also grew incredibly jealous whenever any of the basketball girls would date a man. They began to rant in what they themselves called hate notes. One read, "I hate you for letting a relationship that's intimate come between us. You are so into one person that you suddenly spiral your priorities of importance in a direction that's unlike you to an extent it's unfair to everyone that felt close to you." The anger in these notes got so intense that Hale couldn't even contain them to one page, coming back to write more and more in the margins, around the header, and around the bottoms of the pages. The rant mainly consisted of Hale complaining about being left behind for this man, about this friend not visiting them in the hospital once, and, more interestingly, about being ignored in the 8th grade, implying that they weren't even that close to begin with. Hale started to cope with the fact that these girls were into men by leaning harder into their male imaginary friend. Now, despite only calling this man an imaginary friend in the past, Hale began to claim that this man was their true self all along. However, as we will come to find later, Hale didn't even know what transgenderism was yet, despite how prominent it was in the media around this time. So in the end, they wrote, "I am a gay girl, so how do I find myself and get used to it? Take in on the sights, get out my binoculars and find more opportunities to accept my imaginary boy more. Where will our balloon take us from place to place?" Later, Hale began to feel that maybe, just maybe, the basketball girls would see them more as a friend if they were a male. They wrote, "If I feel I am the boy character in a video game, movie, or TV show, I picture myself as them as me being a male. I think a lot about what I would look as a male and how women would treat me as more than a friend." Hale then continued to rant seemingly about their father, given that they mentioned things like, "I hate him when he acts like a big fat drama queen bitch when one thing is messed up in the schedule, has to take money out of his account, or fix something broke in the house." The complaints toward the father are fairly mundane to say the least, mainly calling him lazy around the house while also complaining that he works too much, as well as saying that his wife is too good for him. Very ironically, Hale also complains that he rants too much. Hale seemed to legitimately think that, due to all of this, he was actually possessed. They wrote, "I wish there were more days when your demon is not around to haunt and torment me. The real you is relaxed enough to crack some jokes." Adding, "Sometimes I ask God why he had to let you deal with this horrid, trenchable creature. I wonder why it had to be you and watch you being manipulated countless years by this monster, controlling your every thought, action, mood." By December, about a year after their fascination with school shooters began, Hale started to feel a desire to attack Cresswell, their old middle school. They began to draw a map of the layout of the school from memory. They outlined how exactly, in an attack, they would progress through the building. They even took note of what they felt was the perfect place to end it all. Knowing that it would be hard to enter the school during regular hours, especially as a random adult, they even began to write down plans on how to gain entry to the building. All throughout the first half of 2019, Hale continued to fantasize about carrying out the attack on the middle school. There was a problem, though. They didn't have any weapons and didn't know how to obtain any. Still though, they continued to plan out the fantasy in excruciating detail, all the while writing rage storms that only grew in intensity. Hale, by this time, had come to see their whiteness as something to be disgusted of. They blamed the color of their skin for being unable to win over black women. It was due to this sheer rage that Hale would see the first obstruction in their plans. Their therapist had noticed that this anger had been growing to a very concerning level. This all crossed the line when Hale admitted to having fantasies about harming both themselves and others. As much as they tried to overcorrect and say that those were only fantasies and nothing they would ever actually do, the therapist recommended another psychological assessment. At the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, it was confirmed that Hale continued to suffer from the mental disorders that they had previously been diagnosed with. It was noted that the depression and the anxiety were by far the largest problems. Hale continued to deny wanting to harm others, and it was found that they showed no signs of psychosis. Still though, it was recommended that Hale take part in an intensive program to address these issues. With their mother saying it was for the best, Hale agreed. They completed the program after 8 weeks in August of 2019. During this period, Hale's therapist retired, leading to them finding a new one. For a very brief period of time, about a few weeks, it did seem that the outpatient program had worked. Hale was being a bit more positive. However, it was only a matter of weeks before they fell back into the pit of anger and despair. Hale went back to their old fantasies of committing a massive attack, feeling that it would give their life and death more meaning. They specifically stressed that they wanted to become a god like Eric and Dylan, saying that they would do so by attacking a specific target, young children. Hale continued to fantasize, sometimes even thinking about other locations and putting them on the back burner as possible backup locations. One of these other locations was their own high school, as Hale experienced a good deal of bullying and ostracization there as well. All of the locations they debated on were due to past incidents in which they felt they had been slighted. On March 11th of 2019, Hale wrote, "Revenge is becoming my hidden middle name. If I was the shooter of IT Cresswell Prep Middle, then you'd be cured from leprosy, blindness of heart from being bullied to a severe extent that those scars are tumored to me." Hale seemed to think that carrying out a shooting would open up the eyes of the basketball girls, who were now busy dating men and even getting married. However, it was around March of 2020 that Hale began to feel that attacking Cresswell wasn't going to be a good idea. This wasn't due to the fact that Hale had realized killing children was wrong, not at all. While they were okay with being called a child killer, there was one label that they couldn't stomach receiving: racist. Yes, given that Cresswell was a predominantly black school, Hale decided that they would need to attack a white school instead or risk being labeled as a racist. Around this time, Hale decided to take a swing at making their own version of the series of tapes that the Columbine shooters recorded. Those tapes have since been referred to as the Basement Tapes, a series of videos that Eric and Dylan recorded before their attack that have achieved mythical status over the years due to the fact that they were never released. Spending the next several months recording them, Hale called their own version the Room Tapes, as they were recorded in the bedroom rather than the basement. Hale wanted to record 13 of them, but only ever ended up filming 12. They were all from around 5 to 40 minutes long. In many, they explained to family and friends why they were going to commit the attack and how they felt about them as people. It was intended for these videos to be given to those people after the attack took place. Some of the other tapes were addressed to the police and the media, with Hale arrogantly, preemptively boasting about how they had gotten away with it and how they had planned it all. Hale began to post pictures of the basketball girls in bikinis and other revealing outfits into their journal, commenting on them in a very creepy fashion. One page read, "Damn, you have turned out so fine. Holy fuck. That blonde hair makes you look like a black Ariel or some shit, an undersea princess. Forget that you don't even want nothing to do with me or the way you live your life. I have become kind of in love with you apart from such attractive femininity." Despite being afraid of being labeled as a racist, Hale continued staking out the Cresswell Middle School simply due to the fact that they had no other idea of where to carry out an attack at that point. On May 22nd, 2019, Hale wrote, "I just want to outline plans for a school shooting. 'Cause I was born to die," claims Lana Del Rey's album. "I was born a nobody like Roxas myself. Kingdom Hearts 358.5 days. His theme song is my life song. I love it when I'm not fucking lonely and when I am my mind full of suicide attempt maps. Or outline maps of IT Cresswell so I can kill all of you just so I can prove my existence is an existence in reality to all of those who purposely avoided me all my life." They went to the school and took pictures of the surroundings and the entrances after hours. Feeling they might have to force their way in, they tested the strength of the doors to the building as well. Eventually, Hale was able to get into the school, although it isn't known how, and take photos of the interior to use in map making. Hale wrote, "The devil is ever so near me. I can feel him. I am his prototype of mockery to laugh at whenever I turn against God in all my cursing, temptations of suicide, thoughts of homicide, fantasies of being the most hated and infamous school shooter, and now even cursing in his own name. I have been under chasms of becoming fascinated with guns, school shootings throughout the years. The shooters themselves, I believe I feel those same feelings they felt, feeling at the very bottom and treated the way surrounded by a bunch of bastard brats in middle and junior high. I feel I share their fate." On November 15th, 2019, Hale wrote a hit list in their journal. While it only contains 4 names and 2 of them have been redacted, we can see at the top of the list was Donald Trump. Underneath are 2 blanks. Given reasons that become clear later on, it's safe to assume that at least one of these was their father. The other could have been their mother. The last name listed isn't even necessarily a name, but the IT Cresswell School as a whole. They mentioned that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the Columbine shooters, had failed due to reasons that have been redacted, insisting that they wouldn't make the same mistake. They felt that if someone autistic like Adam Lanza could kill so many people on impulse, they could do even better. Ironically, after calling their own father demon-possessed and lambasting him for it, Hale began writing a letter from the perspective of a demon who was possessing them. It went on for several pages. It is written to be very performative, almost as if it was meant to be seen later on. It starts with, "Hi, I'm Demon." Much of the writing is about the demon being stuck in Hale's body and either trying to get out or complaining about Hale's boring life. Hale finished off the demon letter by drawing a doodle of a demon and some cliché 666 artwork, saying, "God help me, I've been a rebel. From God's little prophet to Eric and Dylan's secret cadet. Half wishing my life was at an end, half dying. I could kill those bastard adolescents." Hale, struggling with their own gender identity, began to hate church. However, for the time being, the hatred seemed to only be directed toward church itself and not religion. They wrote, "My church doesn't accept gay people, so therefore I hate all of you. Churches who have the rainbow flag outside I will maybe enter, but church overall is pointless and a waste of time and should be destroyed. Some mass killers have got similar thoughts in mind like how I think, and have proved their thoughts made flesh to the world. You Christians/non-believers think that they are evil and wrong, but you are not aware of your own darkness and sin." This hatred toward only the church was confirmed later on the page, where they said, "I know for a fucking fact all of you need Jesus, including me, not just the mass killers and murderers, mentally fucked sick people. You fuckers are no different." Hale came to confess their love to a girl, presumably one of the girls from basketball. The confession didn't land. Hale didn't hear from her all night, crying until the morning. They claimed that this other girl was gay too, but this may have been a mere assumption on Hale's part. They admitted that the girl said that it was weird. Hale took this incredibly personally, ending a rant in their journal about it with, "I wish I planned a mass murder with the whole note I left on you. You people will pay, I swear on the devil." Then they drew a picture of themselves with said devil. Hale continued to rant about Donald Trump in the writings, writing that they felt this was the opinion of black people. So naturally, Hale tried to adopt those views as well. They wrote, "I hate Donald Trump. I'm sure many brown and black people do. Trump servants and supporters, fuck you all." Hale's hatred of Trump mainly seems to be due to the fact that they find him racist and narcissistic. However, their political opinions were notably shallow, given that Hale had very little knowledge of the outside world beyond their own little bubble, even writing that 9/11 was committed by a group led by a name Asuman Muladin. Hale even compared Trump to Ganondorf from the Legend of Zelda series, coming up short with any other way to imagine him in their mind. Hale began to hate heterosexual people as well, clearly writing such. This was due to the fact that the straight black women they wanted did not want them back. Rather than come to the logical conclusion that these women were simply straight and wouldn't be interested in any woman, Hale took it as a personal insult, adopting a lot of incel rhetoric along the way. They even came to rant about the friend zone. One entry states, "Heterosexuals, I hate you female straight people. You're no fun and no painkillers to my gay pain I hate, but not as much as you. I say I don't hate myself, I hate you." For example, this black bitch that's so exquisitely beautiful but was frozen in disliking that I liked her and she called it weird. You heterosexuals never know what to do. Of course you'll want to friend zone or just ignorantly ignore me like little bitches, witches in disguise. On another page, they continued to rant about this woman in particular, ironically with, "You need serious therapy for how unstable you are." Interestingly, Hale began to refer to themselves as asexual, despite all of the talk of being gay and loving women, writing, "A is for Audrey, an asexual individual fucking in the head, but there is a bodysuit that appears normal." This idea of asexuality didn't stick around for very long. Hale started trying out dating apps in hopes of finding black women to no success. Again, they theorized that they would be able to get these women if they were actually a man. If there was some way to become male, they thought that would open the door to get any straight woman that they wanted. They wrote, "I swear to God, straight black bitches are so hard to get. I try this fucking dating app and all I get are country white girls, nerdy white girls, or straight goth dykes, straight men. God damn it, it's because I'm not a straight, sexy black man. Then I'd have all the black women I want." Ramping up in anger against the black women who had rejected them, Hale came to believe that shooting up a majority black school would be appropriate for what they had experienced, feeling that it would be a perfect method of revenge. They wrote, "I think of killing people at all those black schools who hate me. I hate bullies of my past. I hate people who are ignorant and stupid, like they just say shit without thought." Hale also came to justify the idea of killing children in their own mind and on paper. They felt that the kids actually deserved to die, using the Sandy Hook children as a reference. Hale said that every kid at Columbine deserved death, despite the fact that none of the kids killed in that massacre had actually bullied the shooters. Despite being white, praising white killers, and wanting to shoot up a black school, Hale then added, "My race is fucked and was immorally skewed. I guess I could say that I can be treated shitty in exchange for a mess I never created." However, Hale's white guilt really only seemed to cover black people. Hale had no problem with showing hatred towards other groups, writing, "I hate US society, not African or other culture outside the border except you Germans and Muslims. I hate you ugly Indians." It was now March 24th, 2000, Hale's 25th birthday. They wouldn't go about spending it in any meaningful way, though. Instead, they chose to seethe in anger and write about how angry they were at being rejected by women once again. Hale now had the desire to kill the woman who had rejected them as well, reacting about it in their journal and adding her to the hit list. They clearly wrote, "I will kill everything, destroy what you love most. I am blaming you for how my hatred for society came about, because you're just like everyone else. Typical, ungenuine, unkind, unloyal. As for you, you are on the death list. You will die eventually. You're Eve who ate the apple. Sin you are stained with, just like me." In July, Hale began to turn their attentions to another basketball teammate from middle school to obsess over. This was the woman whose name was Sydney. The obsession started very quickly, with Hale writing, "I love you so deeply, for I don't know how long, a love more than just being in love," only mere days after ranting in hatred and anger about the last woman who had rejected them. As with all of the previous love interests, Hale would write dozens and dozens of pages completely dedicated to complimenting Sydney and speaking of their supposed love for her. By June of 2020, it seems that Sydney and Hale might have come to hang out a few times. The extent of these hangouts is unknown, but they were likely nothing special, if they occurred at all. In the journal entry talking about it, Hale used a very old picture of the two of them. Even if it did happen, by Hale's own admission, Sydney stopped seeing them. Hale didn't state why this was, instead simply blaming her for abandoning them as they always did. It was in September that Hale stopped taking their medication regularly, if at all, despite their therapist urging them to do so. As you might assume, this only led to their depression worsening by their own admission. On January 28, 2021, Hale started what they would call My Final Journal. It wasn't. One of the first entries was Hale celebrating that Trump was out of office while also expressing hatred for Joe Biden. The only reason they listed for this was that he attacked the NRA. Any prospects of gun control would obviously hurt Hale's chances at ever committing the shooting that they had always fantasized about carrying out. They later went on a long multi-page rant about gun control. In February of 2021, Hale began to express a real interest in becoming a man. However, they realized that this would be tough without an income. They regretted that college hadn't provided them with a way to live on their own. Hale's feelings of hopelessness about the future, mainly financial security, only served to increase their desire to commit some sort of shooting. Like many others who had gone down the same path, they felt that, if they had no future, they had no reason not to commit an attack. It was around this time that Hale also began to admit to having an unhealthy interest in children, specifically young girls. There were a number of reasons that they were so fixated on the basketball girls from middle school, but they made this reason very clear, writing, "When I look at photos of you as a teenager or preteen, my heart beats loud and my body gets hot. 10 to 11 or 12 years old, you were already looking like a woman." The page then continued along these lines. In this dark obsession, Hale's hatred for white people and obsession with black girls only grew in intensity. By this point, Hale despised their own race, blaming their color for being the reason that they couldn't attract straight women. The rhetoric in their writings no longer left any doubt. One excerpt read, "White people are disgusting, sickening, disgraceful, hateful. White people destroy black lives until they are so tired and numb they don't even know what to feel. I know why black people who are female and beautiful ignore me and don't want to be around me. It's 'cause of the racial tension that has been fragile in our country lately. Who wants to be around a white and waste their time?" Hale began to quite literally white knight them, saying, "If I put myself in a dangerous situation that a black man or woman will potentially get hurt or killed, I will risk my life, even succumbing to my own death. Their lives are much more valuable than mine." But then Hale also started drawing fairly stereotypical renditions of nude black women in provocative positions. Hale decided to draw their own logo of sorts, calling it the Dark Abyss. The logo was made with the intent to show that they had been swallowed up by a black hole of depression and had abandoned all hope of ever getting out of it. Instead of for themselves, they would go on to use this logo as more of a symbol of their attack within their writings. That same month, Hale came to a realization. There was one school that would fit their goals more than any other. That would be their old elementary school, the Covenant, ironically the place where they had spent their happiest years. Hale listed out their reasons for attacking Covenant instead, saying that it was more isolated than Cresswell, meaning it would take longer for the police to arrive, that being a Christian school would give them more notoriety, and that they wouldn't be called a racist. They began to stalk this school in the same manner that they had been doing with the middle school previously. Hale originally intended for the attack to take place on April 13th, 2021. This would have been done in order to serve as a tribute to Columbine, which took place on April 20th. As Hale's sanity continued to crumble, they began to believe that they were the reincarnation of Dylan Klebold, one of the Columbine shooters. This was mainly due to the fact that Dylan was depressive and couldn't find love. While this could apply to many people out there, especially teenagers, Hale saw this as a crazy coincidence. Hale expressed an anger towards Columbiners, fans of Eric and Dylan, for trivializing the massacre. They said that the Columbiners were in fact not like them, and they truly understood Eric and Dylan for what they were, that being gods. However, they decided to postpone the attack in order to focus more on gun training. Hale began to seek private instruction from multiple different avenues throughout Nashville. In turn, they also bought their first gun, and then another. In June 2021 though, Hale hit yet another roadblock in their plans. Their mother both discovered that they had owned a gun and that they had purchased a copy of the book The Columbine Diaries on Amazon. Their mom brought this up to their new therapist, who clearly saw the whole thing as a problem. Hale agreed to give up their gun, the one that their mom knew of, and it was taken to their grandmother's home to be held. Then Hale was once again sent off to the same hospital as before for an evaluation. In private, Hale lamented over the fact that they had been caught, writing, "I just wish I was smarter and not have bought Eric and Dylan's published journals. Jesus Christ, what was I thinking? I made an ungodlike error, human flaw." They admitted to lying during their mental health assessment as well, downplaying the situation. They wrote, "I hate lying to kind-hearted angel doctors at Vanderbilt to help me while taking my assessment. They don't deserve it." The loss of the guns also really ate away at Hale. They poured their heart and mind out in their journal, ranting about wanting those guns back and being unable to stop thinking about their plans. Undeterred, Hale decided to request for a tour of the Covenant School in September of 2021. They said that this was in order to relive their elementary school years, but it was actually done in order to make sure that the layout hadn't changed from what they remembered. They prepared a detailed map of the layout of the school while on the tour and afterwards, deciding on what route they would take and even planning emergency routes if those didn't pay off. Despite everything going on, Hale still couldn't take their mind off of their old basketball teammates. In February of 2022, Hale showed up to a birthday party that a few of their old teammates were attending, completely uninvited. At first, Hale appeared to those around them to be extremely drunk. They were stumbling around, slurring their speech, and clinging to the other girls. Other people at the party were confused, noting that Hale hadn't been seen drinking anything. They concluded that Hale was probably pretending to be drunk, either to be seen as fun or seem like they needed protecting. It was hard to say. Paige herself came up to Hale and asked them for their phones so that they could call their parents to pick them up. Hale quickly and sternly refused. Everyone at the party said that the atmosphere quickly grew negative and uneasy. Paige herself was so uncomfortable that she just left. Hale responded by sending her numerous messages online, begging her to return, seemingly completely sober and no longer showing any signs of being plastered. It seems that Paige ignored the messages and Hale eventually gave up and went home. Despite having so many well-documented mental health issues and known fantasies of hurting others, Hale hadn't done anything that would prevent them from purchasing a gun. While they had been committed, it wasn't an involuntary commitment. This led to Hale going out and buying some more guns with some of the little money they had left. They purchased the first of many in October of 2022. They made sure to keep this a secret from both their parents and their therapist. To buy these weapons, they actually used some of their leftover federal student loan cash. Now, they were much more careful to keep all of this a secret from their mother in particular. Hale's parents returned the previous gun to them a while after, saying that they needed to sell it. They believed that selling the gun would be a symbolic act that they were leaving all of this behind them. The parents were also limited by the law, given that Hale was well into adulthood and that they would have no legal rights to sell their property. Hale then went on to sell the original gun and another shortly after. This was all a ruse, as selling one extra gun they hadn't disclosed would make their parents believe that they were in good faith. In reality, they were still hiding 3 more guns in the house. At college, Hale wasn't doing anything to raise any eyebrows. In fact, school staff and some of their classmates really seemed to love having them around. Hale even won multiple awards, including one for class participation and one for being the most improved. Most of what they made when it came to art was company logos. Much of the artwork expressed a desire to remain a kid forever. The former vice president of the school even described Hale, saying, "She was very quiet, very good at school, very good at art, very good at her illustration. Everything I saw from her was very professional." Hale, hiding their true dark desires, decided to play the cutesy young woman card for all it was worth. They wrote about themselves on LinkedIn. "Aside from art, I enjoy binging on video games, watching movies, and playing sports. There is a childlike part about me that loves to go run to the playground. Animals are my second passion, so I also enjoy spending time with my 2 cats." Some students at the school said that they could have seen Hale writing children's books for a living, completely unaware of their plans against children. One of their classmates, a man only known as Cody, said that he thought Hale was much younger due to the fact that they still dressed like a little kid and brought their stuffed animals to class. He said it seemed like Hale had an obsession with staying a child for as long as possible. When speaking of Hale's art, Cody said, "The art couldn't be more childish, family-friendly, G-rated to a nauseating degree almost." Hale came to be friends with a female classmate called Nikki, even calling her their best friend at times. At this point, Hale was romantically interested in at least 2 women, both of which were their previous basketball teammates. One of them was Sydney, who they were still making a big effort to reconnect with. Another of them was named Paige, who Hale oddly referred to as Brown Girl in a lot of their writings. Hale seemed to have a strong sense of lust towards the both of them, but particularly gravitated towards Sydney at the time. Nobody knew what Hale was really thinking behind the scenes. Nobody knew about the schools they were stalking. Hale already felt that their life was coming to a close and began to act out their life very differently from then on out. Hale decided that they wanted to die, so before that they decided to keep a record of all the things that they wanted to do before they passed on some handwritten notes that they kept in their room. These journal entries consisted of a number of different things, such as finishing cartoon DVD sets, reading books, finishing artwork, watching all of the Studio Ghibli movies, completing a few old-school Pokemon games, watching a bunch of movies on Disney+, getting the Kingdom Hearts books, watching full gameplay videos on YouTube, and finishing some puzzles. They crossed each item out as they progressed through them, finishing most of them. Hale decided to start keeping a journal that would be very reminiscent of that of one of the Columbine shooters, Eric Harris. Throughout his journal, Eric spoke with a lot of anger and fury. He also made a point to be as inflammatory as possible, often using racial and homophobic slurs along the way. Hale also decided to write in very much the same fashion. Throughout all of the writings, Hale displayed a clear god complex, a narcissistic level of self-absorption. They felt that they were truly smarter, deeper, and more creative than anyone else. They felt that they deserved to be catered to and fully embraced by other communities regardless of whether or not they had earned it. They often made a point to note that they were the victim in this upcoming attack, saying that the innocent people they would kill owed it to them to give them their life meaning. The early pages of this journal mainly consisted of what appeared to be notes on gun safety. Given that Hale was attending firearms training at a place called Royal Range, USA at this time, that would make sense. Many of the classes were built around self-defense, something that the notes clearly demonstrate. However, in Hale's mind, this was all simply a step on the way towards becoming a successful killer. After that, a list of gun show dates, times, and admission fees is shown. But very abruptly after that, the journal takes a much darker turn. Hale began to plan more concrete details of how they were going to prepare for the shooting. Given their nature, the majority of these pages were later redacted by the FBI in fear that other prospective school shooters might use them as a diagram for their own attacks. All the while, Hale continued to obsess over articles, documentaries, and the writings that other school shooters had left behind. In particular, they began to take detailed notes about how they felt the killers did and did not succeed in their attacks. This was done in their mind to come up with a foolproof plan to eliminate as many people as possible. They stated multiple times that they would be a complete failure if they killed less than 10 people, hoping to wipe out at least 40 of them. Despite having once again planned the attack to take place in April, Hale once again postponed it. This was due to the fact that they would be graduating from college in May. Instead, they decided to go for either August or September of 2022 instead. It was when that August came around that Hale's plans would come to an abrupt halt. This time, it wasn't due to interference from their parents or therapists. This time, it was due to an emotionally devastating event. Sydney, one of the women they felt they were in love with, had died in a car accident. They couldn't believe it. They said that they had even started to identify as a lesbian publicly for her. They said that they were in a relationship with Sydney, although this is guaranteed to have been a lie. Regardless, the two of them may have hung out a few times. Hale had posted some pictures of them together on social media to appear as if they were in a relationship, but Hale also had a bad habit of using very old photos with the girls. Still, losing the only friend from this group of girls who still gave them the time of day even once in a while served to cause a complete breakdown of their mental state. After this time, even Hale's own teachers noticed that all they posted on social media was about Sydney, incessantly, non-stop, to the point of concern. This also appeared to awaken something within Hale, as it was during this depressing time that they decided to come out as transgender, at least partially. Hale later wrote themselves that this was due to the fact that they never even knew that changing one's gender was even an option in the first place, writing, "It was only until my early 20s I finally found the answer, that changing one's gender is possible." Hale, despite coming out as transgender, still used both their female and male names, Audrey and Aiden, interchangeably, sometimes in the same passages. It's evident on one self-portrait drawing they paired with their self-written description. In it, they introduced themselves as Audrey while using Aiden as the contact email. Their usage of pronouns was all over the place as well, with Hale even writing that their sense of gender was still very much uncertain. Regardless, Hale decided to take a crack at coming out as a man completely. There was one person that wasn't really okay with this, that being their mother. Given that Hale's mom was devoutly religious, she refused to accept anything along those lines. While she didn't care what Hale did outside the home, she forbid them from dressing like a man inside their house. So Hale would simply wait until leaving the house to dress in male clothing. Even then, sometimes they would still leave the house and proceed on with their day as a female. One of their neighbors said that Hale still, at that time, introduced themselves as female, instead insisting that they were just a tomboy. This neighbor continued to address them as Audrey and use female pronouns, something that Hale never corrected them on. All the while, Hale still kept posting about Sydney's death on social media. They continued to post pictures of themselves with Sydney again and again, talking about how much they missed her. Hale also began to speak more of depression in general, despite having hidden it fairly well for many years. One of their old teachers grew very concerned, saying, "From what I saw on her social, she was suffering. She had been openly grieving about that on social media, and during the grieving is when she announced that she wanted to be addressed as a male." About Sydney, Hale later wrote privately, using a mixture of compliments towards Sydney and narcissism about themselves. By this point, Hale had grown so self-absorbed that they had a hard time giving compliments to anyone, instead finding a way to work their own greatness into the comment. Hale wrote, "Sid understood me when no one else did or could. She would comfort me and knew without saying a word. There in my mind was exceptionally rare friend because she did see me as rare, and, well, I'm much more rare than people think or know." This continued throughout August and September. By late October, Hale felt that they had recovered enough from the emotional pain to get back to work. The journal entries picked up again and the plans to commit an attack continued as normal. Given that September had passed, it was time to select a new date for the day. Over the past 2 months, Hale's declining mental state had resulted in them growing even more paranoid than before. They began to create multiple emergency plans and emergency targets in case something came up. Hale then decided that January 17th, 2023 would be the day that they would commit the massacre. In turn, one page is dedicated to all the preparations they would need to make the day before. However, when the 17th came around, Hale quickly changed their mind and postponed the day of the massacre, which they began to refer to as Death Day, by 1 month. Hale began to scope out the Covenant School even more, both online and in person. In particular, they were interested in finding out exactly when the school would be in session, taking note of when their breaks and vacations would occur. As they continued to watch the school in person, Hale still debating on attacking other locations. They made notes as to the security situation of a local mall, deciding that it wouldn't be a safe target to attack due to security. Writing the next page, Hale displayed a sense of urgency. Writing that the president at the time, Joe Biden, was planning on banning assault weapons, Hale made a note of the next voting term. In large letters, they wrote "corrupt fucker" underneath that information. By November of 2022, Hale was drawing up their next plans for how the massacre would play out. Not only that, but they were conducting test runs at the school. For the next couple of months, they would pull up to the school and time themselves doing various exercises. They would even begin to come up with concrete backup plans. Hale started making notes of the staff at the school as well, dividing them into categories based on gender. While they didn't make a comment as to why they chose to separate them, it seemed important to them. On the next page, titled Autism Shit, Hale began to rant about the negative effects of their self-diagnosed autism on their life. These included complaints such as being unable to relate with people, having no friends, having a hard time getting a job and living independently, having their parents around too much, and being angry or sad. It's also worth noting that Hale seems to associate their identity issues with autism as well, writing, "Gender identity is fucked," towards the bottom of the page. The next page is quite unique as it demonstrates that, despite being transgender, Hale seems to have harbored a lot of hatred towards the LGBT community. In a page titled "We're All Fags," they note that lesbians are pretty, but crossed out "are" and replaced it with "can be." Hale then says, "Kill all dykes and girly boy faggots." They then say, "Let all the black police hang us," unable to stomach showing support for white police officers. On the next page, Hale makes it clear that they are targeting children specifically. They wrote, "Pray to your God that your children will live, cause I will try to kill all your kids. Hold on to them while you can, your children are going to die." Afterward, they went on a rant about what exactly they hate so much about the children. In one of the most damning pages of any of their writings, Hale expresses their true hatred fully. Notably, they hate white children, using this as a jumping-off point to rant about white privilege again. It reads, "Kill those kids, those crackers, going to private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks with their daddy's Mustangs and convertibles." It's worth noting that Hale at first wrote "Mom's Mustangs" here, but chose to change it to "Daddy's." It continues, "Fuck you little shits. I wish to shoot you weak-ass dick with your mop yellow hair. Wanna kill all you little crackers. Bunch of little with your white privileges. Fuck you faggots." This journal included a list of dates and a countdown. Hale didn't go through with committing the attack on February 17th as they had previously planned, crossing off dates past that point. It's possible that this was because Sydney's celebration of life was all set to take place on March 11th, as it was written in the journal. Hale decided to change the date to later in March, then once again postpone it until April to be closer to the anniversary of Columbine again. By all accounts, this event was awkward. At Sydney's celebration of life memorial, Hale approached Paige as she was leaving and excitedly asked if the two of them could hang out. Paige was very put off by this, telling them that it was not the time and place, given that they were all grieving. Hale made another entry in April, this time saying that April indeed did remind them of Columbine. They made a note saying that it would be great to, in their words, make history 3 days before Eric and Dylan did. After, they made their reason for committing the attack as clear as possible. It wasn't going to be for the purpose of raising awareness or for revenge against how they felt trans people were treated by Christians, like many came to speculate. It wasn't because they really had any sort of point to make at all. It was about infamy. They wrote, "I have to kill so I can be remembered in the most horrific way possible. That way no one will ever forget." Hale began to make note of what they wanted to do for the week leading up to Death Day. They made a point to list out some documentaries about school shooters, mainly Columbine, that they wanted to watch. On the list was a documentary about Adam Lanza as well. The last page of this journal contained more concrete plans for what they wanted to do the morning of the shooting. They started drawing handwritten maps of the school on notebook paper separate from the journal. These have all since been redacted, but it's clear to make out that each floor had its own map. Hale also made notes of which routes throughout the school would be ideal to take. They began to take all of the information they had compiled and put it onto several thumb drives that they would hide throughout their bedroom. Hale said they did this in order to control the narrative of their own attack rather than let people jump to conclusions. Hale came to graduate from their art college. After that, they struggled to find any path forward. They began working as a freelance graphic designer, to very little success, and delivered groceries from online orders. None of this bothered Hale all too much, as they felt it was all about to end anyway. Being all out of paper, they decided it was time to start another journal. This time, the writing would be much less like Eric Harris's journal and much more akin to Dylan's. This journal would come to display much more of a sense of sadness while still retaining a lot of the anger. It would also contain more romantic poems, letters to women that they liked, and plenty of drawings of hearts. These elements were all much more heavily featured in Dylan Klebold's journals in comparison to Eric's. Hale was on track to emulating both writing styles. Still, the beginning of the journal contains some elements more similar to Eric's. It starts with some sketchy artwork very reminiscent of the art that Eric used in his own journal. While Hale was an artist, they seemed to dumb down their own talent to better match Eric's scratchy, amateur-looking doodles. Some of the first text in the journal consists of the lines, "Why does my brain not work right? Because I was born wrong." With the text at the bottom of the page adding, "Nothing on earth can save me, never-ending pain, religion won't save." A lot of the earlier portions of the journal consist of rants that most people would find fairly mundane. On one page, Hale complains about not being consistent enough with the gym and then rants about online scammers on the next. Hale then alludes to being in love with a brown girl, that being Paige. By now, they were focusing much more on this love interest now that Sydney was gone. They wrote, "No brown girls, no love. I am nothing. Brown is the most beautiful." Before going into more detail on the next page, Hale writes a message to Paige in a confusing, disjointed fashion, going into a bit of their own identity issues along the way, adding, "Audrey is not my name, but, when you say it, I am just as the little one. I was A-okay, then I can be a kid again with you, alongside you even if I can't really be with you." The next 3 pages of the journal contain more of these teenager-esque love poems before Hale took a break to complain about failing at freelance jobs multiple times before once again returning to the love poems afterward. Later in the journal, after many more pages of love poems and ramblings about who she kept calling the brown girl, Hale wrote of their mental illness for the first time in this book. They wrote, "Love cannot be real if my autism is." A few pages later, there is a message that mentions Sydney. It reads, "I know Sydney is waiting for me. My time is coming soon to leave this realm behind, all my pain, and all that I have except you." Hale continues to speak of both Sydney and Paige throughout. While the FBI censored their names in the handwritten scans of the journal, among many other things, the names were left unobscured in a text transcript of its contents. This is where we can see that Hale mentions Paige by name, surrounded by hearts. After writing a few more pages, Hale further stated their desire to commit a massacre in written form. Oddly, it was in the form of an apology, seemingly directed towards Nikki, the girl they had come to see as a best friend in college. Going by the text transcript, they wrote, "I'm so sorry, Nikki. I didn't mean to plan my massacre on the 17th. I'm going to be a terrible shit for leaving you. How bad my heart hurts. Tomorrow is my last day on Earth. I love you. I am so sorry." However, on the next day, they returned to add a comment towards the bottom of the page with a psych, reading, "P.S. Not leaving yet. I couldn't do it. I don't want to ruin your day. I'll wait as planned." On the next page, Hale laments about being scammed, specifically by using the word again. By the nature of the writing, it's apparent that they had been scammed out of money by people online multiple times at this point, although the nature of how it happened isn't quite known. Hale also mentioned breaking a figurine, noting that it was done during an outburst of anger and sadness. They regretted that they would leave the only things they loved behind. Underneath, Hale rants about being called bipolar, saying, "Then I'm told I'm bipolar by some prideful bitch. No one gets me. Everyone typical misunderstands autism." Underneath that, Hale comments more in the sense that they are gay, not transgender, writing, "I'm not emo or bipolar, yet a faggot with no lover." A few pages later, Hale once again mentions the upcoming massacre, again writing it in the form of an apology, this time to Paige. It was edited later, reading, "Paige, I'm going to kill people tomorrow." Tomorrow is crossed out and replaced with someday. "Please don't be mad. I'm going to do something so bad tomorrow." Again, tomorrow is crossed out to read sometime. "It's too sad to even think what you might feel. I'm so sorry." A few pages later, Hale, once again using slurs against gay people, described their feelings towards their father while drawing what appears to be a man being shot. It seems they harbored some hatred towards him for being retired. While redacted in the journal, the text version reads, "Having a father in this life is gay. No actual job, no actual responsibility. Drop dead, f***it." On the next page, they also list that they wanted to be there for Nikki on her birthday. Over time, Hale's journal entries grew less angry and more depraved. Rather than sticking to love poems, they began to state their regret that, due to not having the male appendage, they wouldn't be able to, let's say, have anal relations with a young brown girl, specifically writing it out and even including a drawing. Hale began to rant about their parents' wealth and white privilege, something that would continue to be a talking point from then on out. The writings then proceeded to mainly consist about rants of not having a penis, being unable to get up early for work for the delivery job, wanting to die, and various other smaller complaints. Periodically, Hale would continue to rant about their issues with their dad, calling him by gay slurs and stewing over the fact that they felt unloved by him. It wasn't too long before Hale continued to rant about politics as well. They drew a picture of a torn American flag and led with the headline, "So now in America, it makes one a criminal to have a gun or be transgender or non-binary," notably putting being a gun owner higher than being transgender on the oppression rankings. Later on down the page, they ranted that soon America would be like England, writing, "Soon this goddamn country will turn out no fun like England or Europe. No guns, no gender rights, no freedom of speech or pursuing of radical ideas, no mischief. You can't even carry a knife in England, fucking pussies. Ending off, they wrote, "So now because of you, I wish death on myself because of the pure hatred of my female gender. With no rights, anyone's country is a shitty dictatorship." From that point onward, much of the journal consists of seemingly random, disconnected lists with little explanation, along with anger towards their female body and expressions of love towards Paige. This culminated with an entire page detailing their hatred of their own body that they see as ugly compared to true beauty, which is Paige. Shortly after, it appears that Hale had once again decided on a day for the massacre, one that they were determined to make happen. They decided on March the 27th. This was done using complicated formulas in which Hale picked numbers significant to them, like their, Sydney, and Paige's jersey numbers, the Columbine anniversary, and more. These formulas would have only made sense to them. They wrote, "Death Day, 3/27/23. I can't wait. Nature needs enigmas. I am one, thank God. I will feel much better without bastard. Who needs fathers? Definitely not me." On the next page, though, Hale once again went on a long-winded ramble about loving Paige. It was here that it was implied that Hale hadn't actually had any contact with her for a long time. From the writing, it seems that Hale attended a live show in which Paige was performing on February 27th. After the show, it is written that Paige put her hand on Hale, and in turn they did the same. They wrote, "So when her hand laid onto me after the show, it's being touched by an angel. But my problem is living in hell. My mind and my body is a prison. Anything that triggers it, or stimulates it, only makes things worse. She made history that night even if she was nervous and her back felt clammy. Only natural to sweat with having a first live show, and she's still beautiful. She knows who she is, and all the rest of the world in time will too. She's famous to me, a star to many. Little does she know how we will soon share the same fate. She will live a legend and I will die a shooter, hopefully to become infamous. I will make history too. No one will forget neither of us. She will be the blessing, and I will be the horror to inflict pain." Hale then started a new trend in the journal by writing the next pages as if they were directly speaking to Paige. In one page, they once again reiterated that they wanted a male member so that they could insert it into her backside. They then went on a very long, dense rant about their mother not being able to accept their sexuality. As the rant continued, they expressed an interest in attaching male members to their stuffed animals as well, which they did. Hale went into graphic detail about making the male stuffed animal penetrate the female in the backside repeatedly, adding that putting it into the female area was too hard because the male stuffed animal was far too big. The rant itself is too graphic to read on YouTube, but in the end, Hale mentioned that this play lasted all night and into the morning, ending with, "God, I am such a pervert. I waste too much time in my fantasies." After these pages began a countdown. Hale would continue to document their feelings of anger, sadness, and excitement as the day approached while still making periodic drawings and poems towards both Sydney and Paige. After, there was a message expressing a desire to please Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold in the afterlife with their upcoming attack. On March 25th, Hale decided to go out for the day. Nikki's mother, Julia, said that Hale came over to their home to celebrate Nikki's birthday. It had been a while since they had met. The two went back into Nikki's bedroom, shared a steak, and spent the next several hours playing video games and drawing together. Hale didn't mention this in the journal at all. Instead, they wrote about their trip to the gun range and what they experienced along the way. They wrote, "On my way to the range and saw a billboard on suicide only meters away from the Sumner Gun and Supply. Then after the time in range, while cleaning my AR, a lady got ricocheted in the leg and ankle. I saw the EMTs working on her leg on the floor and they took her away on the gurney. Foreshadowing on my own massacre? There was blood splatters on the floor. Police asking questions to the other people that were in the range. On the way home, I look up at the sky and parts of clouds peeking out sunlight like heaven shining down. Foreshadow of my death? Saw sunlight peering clouds twice in a row this week. Are the angels telling Sid I'm gonna die soon? Huh." Hale prepared one more journal entry in preparation for the attack. This page showed a very detailed plan, down to the minute, of how the attack would play out the next morning. The day of the massacre was now approaching soon. On the night of the 26th, one day before the decided upon date, Hale decided to get all of their equipment ready and prepare one last video. They then made sure that all of the data was stored on the flash drives as it should be, hoping that that would mean it would all come to be leaked someday. The morning of the 27th finally came. It was the day that Hale had decided on for their attack. This time, they weren't going to back down at the last moment. They spent some time in the early morning finishing off the journal, adding a few more pages to top the whole thing off. They began with, "Forgive me, God, this act will be inglorious." On the next page, they continued, "Today is the day. The day has finally come. I can't believe it's here. Don't know how I was able to get this far, but here I am. I'm a little nervous, but excited too. Been excited for the past 2 weeks. There were several times I could have been caught, especially back in the summer of 2021. None of that matters now. I'm almost an hour and 7 minutes away. Can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm ready. I hope my victims aren't. My only fear is if anything goes wrong. I'll do my best to prevent any of the sort. God, let my wrath take over my anxiety. It might be 10 minutes tops. It might be 3 to 7. It's gonna go quick. I hope I have a high death count. Haha." Hale left the entire second half of the notebook completely blank, only continuing on the very last page. They concluded with, "Remember me for the good things, Audrey," oddly ending the journal by signing with their female name. At the end, Hale left one more note for their parents, mainly instructions on how to care for their possessions after their death. They put this final paper into the journal and closed it for good. That Monday morning, Hale picked up their red duffel bag full of supplies along with a backpack and headed for the door. Their parents asked what was inside, but Hale told them it was nothing and not to worry. At 8 a.m., they left the house and hit the road, heading for Royal Range, USA, the range in which they had previously taken gun lessons. However, they didn't plan on actually attending the range. Instead, they only parked in a corner of the parking lot far from the building, loaded their guns, and put on a tactical vest containing extra magazines. Shortly after, Hale got back into the car and headed towards the target, the Covenant. At around 9:30 a.m., Hale arrived at the school and parked in the parking lot near the west side of the building. They continued to sit in the car for some time, debating on how to proceed. Before that, though, they wanted to send one more message, this being to Paige herself. Hale made a vague post on Instagram that was directed towards Paige. After, at 9:57 a.m., they messaged her directly, saying, "So basically that post I made on here was about you. That was basically a suicide note. I'm planning to die today. This is not a joke. You'll probably hear about me on the news after I die. This is my last goodbye. I love you. See you again in another life. Audrey/Aiden." Paige reacted almost immediately, saying, "Audrey, you have so much more life to live. I pray God keeps you and covers you." Hale agreed that this was true, but stated, "I know, but I don't want to live. I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to upset you or get attention. I just need to die. I wanted to tell you first because you are the most beautiful person I've ever seen and known all my life. My family doesn't know what I'm about to do. One day this will make more sense. I've left more than enough evidence behind, but something bad is about to happen." Paige was shocked, later stating that while the two were close as kids, she hadn't actually talked to Hale in years. She wasn't even sure why she, of all people, was the one getting this message. Nevertheless, she called an emergency hotline and the sheriff's office right after. Little did she know, it was already too late. By the time she was making the call, the plan was already in motion. Hale, armed with an AR pistol, a 9mm carbine rifle, and a handgun, made their way up to the entrance. They pulled up their gun and shot through the glass doors, shattering them. They then walked through the open glass and into the building. Michael Hill, the school custodian, was cleaning a nearby room at the time. Hearing the glass shattering, he went out into the hall to see what had happened. He then locked eyes with Hale right there. Seeing the guns, he turned around to start running away. Hale then took their first shot, shooting him several times in the back with the AR pistol. They then left him there, bleeding from his injuries as they proceeded forward. The smoke from the gunshots triggered a smoke detector nearby on the ceiling, causing the fire alarm to start ringing out throughout the school. As a result, the school doors automatically unlocked. Teachers inside gathered their students to leave the school, assuming that nothing was really going on, but taking the proper steps just in case. Many students formed organized, single-file lines in front of their teachers to leave the building. 3 students, Evelyn Dickhouse, William Kinney, and Haley Scruggs, all 9 years old, formed the front of one of these lines. All 3 of them were 3rd graders, slowly making their way towards the stairwell in front of their teacher. There they ran right into Hale on the stairs. Hale opened fire without hesitation, shooting all 3 of them. Their teacher, who was actually a substitute teacher named Cynthia Peak, was there with them. Hale pulled up their gun and aimed it towards Cynthia as well, hitting her several times. Cynthia as well hit the ground as the rest of the students ran, fleeing from the building. Cynthia watched Hale step over her and proceed down the hallway as she began to fade out. Other students and teachers, hearing the gunshots, realized what was really going on. They all filed back into their classrooms as per the protocol. They began to barricade the doors, hurrying to close them off before the gunmen might find them. Meanwhile, Hale walked back towards the previous 4 victims and shot them multiple more times, ensuring their demise. Hale then walked over to a couple of doors where more 3rd grade classrooms were held. They pulled up their AR pistol and aimed it towards the doors. They then proceeded to empty the entire magazine, firing over and over until it was time to reload. Luckily, they only injured one student with some shrapnel in one of the classrooms. Feeling that this approach wasn't working, Hale instead reloaded and went to search for more victims on the 2nd floor. Unaware what exactly was going on, the school head teacher, Catherine Kuntz, left the school office and headed towards the classroom on the 2nd floor, completely unaware that Hale was there. Hoping to investigate the source of the fire alarm, Catherine unknowingly came across the culprit immediately, locking eyes with Hale then and there. Catherine asked Hale what they were doing there. Hale didn't respond, instead pulling up their gun and firing a volley of bullets once again. After Catherine collapsed to the ground, Hale approached her and shot her twice more at point-blank range. After this, Hale switched to using their rifle. They began to look for more potential victims in the rooms near Catherine's body. After turning up no more potential victims, Hale instead made their way to the church offices where Catherine had come from. Hale entered into these rooms and began to look around, but they didn't look hard enough. Just out of sight, many staff members were actually hiding underneath desks and within some cabinets. Luckily, Hale left the room once again without ever seeing them. Hale instead walked towards a nearby stairwell to go back down towards the 1st floor of the building. It was around this time that the police received their first call reporting an active shooter. When the police arrived, a teacher ran up to them, telling them that many of the students were still in lockdown and that a few seemed to be missing. Hale, by their very own criteria, was failing. They had wanted to kill 10 people. At this point, they had shot 6 and couldn't find any more. They had written in their own journals that anything less than 10 meant they were an amateur, a failure, and nothing near godlike. In a burst of sheer anger, they began shooting their gun into a television nearby. Screaming, they started shooting at a pair of double doors right after. Feeling dejected, they decided to walk back up to the 2nd story of the building. There they entered into the chapel room, a sanctuary that displayed a large stained glass image of Adam and Eve. Hale aimed up towards the glass and shot it out, firing 7 bullets in total. They then walked towards a nearby window and noticed the police cars outside. The fire alarm had been so loud that it would have been impossible to hear them approaching. Hale began to fire out of the windows towards some police officers and their vehicles. After a 2-minute gunfight, they failed in injuring any police, only managing to disable some of their cars. The police have learned a lot since Columbine. They've found it's by far better to enter into the building and risk dying as a hero than it is to wait outside for the attack to end. Hale, being obsessed with Columbine, likely didn't expect this to be the case. It was around the end of this gunfight that a few more police officers had entered into the building. Due to both the sound of the gunfire and the fire alarm, Hale had no idea they were coming. At 10:25 a.m., the 5-officer police team approached Hale in the sanctuary. Right away, one officer opened fire with his rifle on Hale, catching them off guard and knocking them to the ground. While their original intention was to take Hale into custody, they noticed that they were still holding a gun. Once Hale's arms started to move towards them, they could no longer take any chances. A second officer fired their 9mm pistol towards Hale, fatally wounding them in the process. In total, Hale was shot 4 times. Once in the left arm, once in the right thigh, once in the chest, and once finally in the head. It was now all over. By 10:27, the police had managed to clear out the rest of the building, finding no other gunmen in sight. They took the 3 young victims outside to the ambulances, but it was already too late. All 3 of them were pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. Catherine Kuntz similarly had already succumbed to her injuries. They were surprised to see that the remaining 2 victims, Cynthia and Michael, were still alive, but only barely. Unfortunately, they too succumbed to their injuries at the hospital. The police department set up a reunification center at the local Woodmont Baptist Church. Throughout the afternoon, busloads of confused, frightened children were taken there to meet up with their parents. It was later found that Hale had fired their guns 152 times during the whole attack, 126 times from the AR pistol, 25 from the rifle, and once from the handgun. Hale still had 272 rounds on their person, meaning that the attack could have continued for quite a long time if not for the police intervening. 6 people had lost their lives in the attack, all killed completely at random. One of the children, Haley Scruggs, was, by pure coincidence, the pastor's daughter. The police made their way out to Hale's car and found a mountain of evidence. Inside was their wallet, keys, phone, their beloved stuffed animals, and even more loaded magazines. Inside the backpack Hale had brought were the 2 journals as well as maps of the school. It was found within these writings that Hale had planned on attacking them all and then their own family members after as a finale to the entire attack. Luckily, this didn't happen. Once they figured out who their attacker was, the police were quickly able to locate where they lived. They went out to Hale's home to conduct surveillance while waiting on a search warrant. They saw Hale's father leaving and stopped him a short distance away from the home. He said that he had heard of the attack on the school and worried that Hale might have been involved. Not knowing who might be inside, the police didn't take any chances and made their way into the home tactically after getting their warrant. Throwing in a few flashbangs, they made their way inside. They located Hale's bedroom shortly after, finding a mountain of evidence relevant to the case. They dug up many more notebooks and writings, most of which were completely irrelevant to the investigation. They also took all of Hale's electronic devices and flash drives. They found yet another gun hidden in the bedroom, this being a 12-gauge shotgun. Then they found a t-shirt very similar to the one that Hale had worn in the attack, displaying their full logo on the front. The media quickly went into a frenzy. While the police had used the name Audrey Hale and female pronouns when talking about the shooter, the media quickly dug up that the killer was actually a transgender man. Barely even speaking the names of the victims, the case instead turned into a battle over pronouns, trans rights, and misgendering. And for quite a while, that would continue to be the case. Shortly after the shooting, the Covenant School issued a statement asking for some privacy during these tough times, especially while the investigation was still going on. A memorial was then set up outside the school where a lot of people came to pay their respects. At the nearby Belmont University, a concert was held in honor of the victims, with many famous celebrities like Carrie Underwood coming out to perform. A state representative, Andy Ogles, whose district includes Nashville, tweeted out, "We are sending our thoughts and prayers to the families of those lost. As a father of 3, I am utterly heartbroken by this senseless act of violence." This led to a bit of controversy when it was found that he had posted a photo of him and his family posing with rifles in front of a Christmas tree a few years prior. An Arizona gubernatorial press secretary, Jocelyn Berry, tweeted less than 24 hours after the shooting a picture of an actress posing with 2 pistols with text reading, "Us when we see transphobes." The picture was very heavily condemned after the shooting, leading to her resignation only 2 days later. Paige, the woman Hale had fawned over, came to speak on CNN of what had happened, emphasizing that the two hadn't really spoken much in years. She said, "I knew her well when we were kids. I didn't know the adult. I didn't know that side of her. We got to see her grow in her skill on the court. We did really good that year. We went all the way to the city championship, so it was a really good year for us. We had a real camaraderie." On a page for Hale's school, several former teammates spoke of their shock at what had happened. One posted, "This is crazy, y'all. I'm sure any of us could say the Audrey we knew back in high school was so opposite from who they were this morning. It's tough enough to grasp if we even knew Audrey, you know? I know this is a shock to the NSA fam. My heart breaks for those sweet families who lost loved ones this morning. This is crazy." Another responded with "Jesus" in all caps, while another reacted with hearts. The police officers who took Hale down were honored for their efforts in neutralizing them. These men were Michael Collazo and Rex Engelbert. Both of them were labeled as heroes for stopping the attack before it could have been much worse. After their body cam was released, they were praised for their bravery and professionalism. The police came to warn Hale's parents that they had been in grave danger and that their child had planned on murdering them as well. They could have said this due to something that was listed in Hale's to-do lists, because of the negative writings towards them in general in the journal, or because they really were the other 2 names listed on Hale's hit list. The police's exact reason for saying this is still unclear. Hale's family was left with little to do but go into hiding after the attack. Their father did return to the family home, now boarded up, a few days later to get some belongings, but didn't speak to any reporters. Hale's mom did post on social media, asking for privacy and linking to a few Keep Guns Out of Schools fundraisers. For the most part, they have lived a very secluded life since the attack. As it usually goes with mass shootings, poor old Sam Hyde was labeled as the perpetrator online shortly after it all went down. Given that the shooter was already fairly known in the media, this really didn't have an effect on the public. What did have an effect, though, was a fake manifesto that was posted to Twitter claiming to be from the killer. While many came to call Hale's writings a manifesto, this wasn't really the case. Without delving too deep into the technical meaning of the word manifesto, these writings were more of a collection of casual journal entries mainly meant for Hale themselves. The FBI adamantly refused to release the journals, saying that the detailed instructions Hale left behind in preparation for the attack would only serve as an instructive guide for other prospective killers. This led to a problem though. Without the journals being released, the public had very little to go on as to Hale's past or their motivations for carrying out the attack. Many came to assume that Hale was only doing this due to feeling oppressed as a transgender person and taking their anger out on Christians who were less than supportive of their lifestyle. Unfortunately, with a case like this, it's impossible to talk about it without involving politics. This is because the immediate aftermath of the case mainly revolved around a political discussion instead of the actual deaths, and both sides of the political spectrum took it very differently. When it came to the right, their reaction was more or less what you might expect. Mainstream media outlets and online users would tend to point out that Hale was transgender in order to try and use that as proof that all transgender people are insane or evil. The response from the left was a bit more surprising. While many people on the left out there mainly just wanted the transgender aspect of the story to be left out, feeling that it wasn't really relevant, many others out there had much more extreme opinions. Users online will often write that school shootings and the admiration of school shooters are a right-wing phenomenon, but this case came to prove that it's not quite so simple. While the majority of people on both the left and right don't admire these kinds of people, this case served as clear evidence that both have the potential to. Some portions of many left-leaning platforms online actually began to view Hale as a hero, such as on Reddit and Tumblr. This side of the internet only really cared about two things: that Hale was trans and that they seemed to target white Christians. Due to this, they were able to overlook the child murder and see Hale as one of their own. On Reddit alone, several different subreddits were made for the shooter. These included r/AidenHale and r/Covenant Shooting, among others. To understand how much of a failure of moderation this is, Columbiners tend to make up the majority of the supporters for school shootings that you will see online, but Reddit does actively ban Columbine subreddits that allow admiration for the killers. Reddit has still not banned all of these Hale subreddits. Partway through the writing of this video, r/Covenant Shooting was banned, but it was for lacking an active moderator, not for its content. r/AidenHale remains and has stood for 2 years. Most posts on these subreddits and on some others were in defense of Hale or featured some sort of hero worship. Included were posts urging users not to dead-name Hale, saying that that's not what they would have wanted. This was a bit odd considering that Hale used both names to the very end, even, unknown to the posters, signing Audrey on the final page of the journal before heading out. Others blame the parents, saying that they didn't accept Hale as gay. We later came to learn that this happened long after the planning of the massacre had started. Rest in peace posts were also made, as well as others that lamented that they couldn't attend Hale's funeral, urging other users to donate to trans charities in their name. Others did post that they hated Hale. This was, first and foremost, due to the fact that they hated that Hale had hurt trans activism. Their hatred was, above all, due to the fact that Hale's actions would likely hurt their cause. The fact that 6 people had died was usually further down the post as a secondary reason for the hatred if it was mentioned at all. In the end, though, many Redditors were still on the other side. Many others said that misgendering wasn't really a concern to them when the subject had hatefully murdered several children. Others said that trans activism came second to more relevant issues to the case like mental health. Still though, the posts in support of Hale continue to this day. On Tumblr, an even more left-leaning platform, and one that is also known for hosting communities in support of school shooters on both sides, such as Columbiners, there was even more support for Hale's actions. As expected, there is even some fan art. Some users outright celebrated Hale as being cool, while others were upset with the fact that the topic came down mainly to gender and that Hale didn't get more respect in the true crime community. Others wrote entire blogs in support of Hale and what they had done. Little did any of them know, not only did Hale plan the attack long before even knowing what transgenderism even was, they didn't target the kids for being Christians at all. The main plan had been to shoot up a black school, and that only changed because Hale didn't want to be seen as racist. The fact that the kids were Christian was only a byproduct, something that Hale only mentioned as a factor that might get them more attention. Hale actually continued to believe in God until the very end. Not only that, Hale actually showed a lot of hatred towards both the LGBT community and towards the Biden administration. One thing that these users would probably hate the most was knowing that Hale ranked being a gun owner as being on the same level of oppression as being transgender within the journals. In the end, this case came to prove that showing support for mass killers isn't necessarily something exclusive to the left or the right. No matter what side of politics, many people out there will, unfortunately, support the most heinous acts imaginable as long as they feel that the person is on what they feel is their side. It shouldn't be controversial to say that anyone can be evil, regardless of the demographic. Not only did failing to release the journals result in a disturbing amount of support for Hale online, but it also prevented further legislation from being made regarding firearms. Many public figures came to call for the release of the documents, with a House Republican caucus chairman, Jeremy Faison, saying, "We cannot possibly address this horrific situation until we know what was in the manifesto." Joe Biden, who Hale lambasted in the journals for calling for gun control, said, "We have to do more to stop gun violence. It's ripping our communities apart, ripping at the very soul of the nation. We have to do more to protect our schools so they aren't turned into prisons." Many protesters began to call for increased gun control after the shootings. At the protest, a lot of children held signs saying "I'm 9" to further demonstrate the young age of the victims. After, the state legislature passed some bills in order to further improve safety measures in schools. It became a requirement for even private schools to hire school resource officers in order to help prevent such attacks. On April 28th of 2023, the Tennessee governor, Bill Lee, announced that the journals would be released very soon. However, that didn't happen. The Covenant School was concerned, fearing that sensitive information might come out with the release. This was understandable, as, after all, Hale had written extensively about their staff in the journals. A judge agreed not to release the writings for the time being. Later that year in November, though, 3 photos of Hale's diary taken while the police acquired evidence were leaked. The Nashville police came to confirm that they were indeed genuine. One of the pages leaked showed the page in which Hale referred to the kids as crackers and ranted about white privilege, confirming that Hale was indeed politically a liberal. This sent the media into yet another frenzy, with many of their assumptions having been confirmed. Due to this leak, Hale's parents no longer had the confidence to cooperate with the police. They refrained from providing them with Hale's later medical papers, citing little confidence that they would remain private. Much later, in 2023, an attorney for Hale's family did come to say that Hale had been being treated for autism since 2001. However, this would contradict everything that had been said previously. The omission of mentions of autism in previous reports, while clearly stating all of the other mental problems that Hale had, would be odd. It's possible that this information had been hidden from the public. It's possible that the lawyer had only heard Hale had autism from it being in their own highly publicized writings. It's also possible that the lawyer made a mistake. Without clear medical records, it will be hard to say. The parent company of a local newspaper, the Tennessee Star, decided to sue the FBI after they denied the release of the journals during a FOIA request. In March of 2024, a federal judge ruled in their favor, ordering the FBI to hand over the writings. The FBI tried to dismiss the suit, but the judge said that they hadn't provided enough detail as to why the papers couldn't be released. Given that the National Police Association was also suing the city of Nashville for the release of the documents, there wasn't much that could be done. The FBI continued to say that their reasoning was that the notes might inspire other shooters, but it was pointed out that the majority of these writings didn't feature these sort of plans, and that they were perfectly capable of redacting those more specific details, as they did in the final release. In April of 2025, the police department formally closed their investigation into the shooting, given that the perpetrator was long gone and that there was nothing more to be done. They concluded that, in the end, Hale's only motivation was notoriety and attention. They released a full report detailing their findings. In conclusion, they wrote that the killer wanted material to be publicly released and commented upon. They wanted books, documentaries, and movies to be made about the attack. They wanted the guns used in the attack to be placed in a museum and wanted their bedroom to be left in its current state as some sort of memorial. They wanted to inspire other shooters to succeed. And, above all, they wanted to show off their superiority to others. However, by Hale's own definition, they were a failure. They had mocked other shooters who killed less than 10 people, calling them amateurs and deeming them as detrimental to the cause. Hale felt that only killers with 10 or more bodies could be truly godlike. It was then and only then that they could even come close to deserving something close to the notoriety that Eric and Dylan had achieved. At least we can know that, in their own mind, Hale died a failure. Adding insult to injury, they were killed by the very same white police that they hated so much. Since the release of the journal, support for Hale online has gradually decreased. It's unclear if this is due to the journals containing material unexpected to those who admired Hale, or simply because enough time has passed for their supporters to move on to other tragedies to be passionate about. Given that Hale is dead, the main journals have been released, and that there have been no new developments in the case, it seems that Audrey/Aiden Hale's story is finally over. This story serves as a grim reminder of what can go wrong when a mentally ill person goes down the wrong path. This story perfectly demonstrates that it doesn't matter what side of politics you're on or what your identity happens to be. Evil can and will still rear its ugly head after the perfect storm takes place.